I'm Aaron Sagers, and this is Talking Strange.
My guest today is Jason Offutt, and he is an author and an academic. He grew up on a farm near the little town of Orick, Missouri. And in his life, he's been a farmhand, a journalist, a photographer, a bartender, and the mayor of that same small town. He now teaches journalism at Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville and keeps the world safe from the forces of evil, according to his online bio, which there's a lot more in that bio, which I quite like, but I'm going to stop it there because he's also the author of, I counted 17 books. I know there's some more on the way. And his book, Chasing American Monsters, 250 Creatures, Cryptids, and Hairy Beasts. It came out back in 2019, I believe. And now we have the follow-up, which is out now. And it is Chasing North American Monsters, a guide to over 250 creatures from Greenland to Guatemala. And he's with us now, Jason Offutt. Hey, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This is great.
What's your origin story as far as getting into sort of the cryptid side of things?
I was a newspaper nerd when I was young. As soon as I could read, we had 2 subscriptions to different newspapers, and I read them all the time. And in 1973, yes, I am that old, in 1973, I read a news story about a Bigfoot encounter in my home state. It was in Louisiana, Missouri, which is between Hannibal, which is where Mark Twain spent his formative years, and St. Louis on the Mississippi River. And within about a 2-3 week span, there were many reports of people encountering a Bigfoot. And I'm like, this is in the newspaper. This is true. The whole Bigfoot sightings in my state. So that really got me started on the fact that, hey, cryptids might actually be real. But I mean, before that, we had a channel, an independent TV channel that we got that showed monster movies all the time. So I was already geared in that direction.
You also had a full-bodied apparition sighting as a younger person, right?
Yes. I grew up in a farmhouse. We lived out in the country, about 6 miles away from the nearest town, and the farmhouse had been a 2-room schoolhouse at one point. And, when the school closed down, it was turned into a 3-bedroom home, and it was about 120 years old when I was a kid, so it's probably, 1,600 years old at this point. But I remember clearly I was about 8 years old, and I walked out of my bedroom into a hallway that was just right in front of my bedroom. And in the hallway, we kept bookshelves, and I was probably going for the encyclopedia, the World Book Encyclopedia D, so I could look up dinosaurs. That's what I was really into. And I walked into the hallway, and there was a little boy about 6 years old standing there. And he had brown hair. It was messed a little bit, but it was parted on the left-hand side. And he was wearing a blue flannel shirt and blue jeans. And I don't know what he was wearing on his feet, because I noticed at that point that I could see through him. And I just stood there and we stared at each other. It was probably 10 seconds, maybe even less. It seemed like an hour, but he blinked at one point, and that broke my shock. And I turned around and walked into my bedroom and shut the door, and I didn't talk to anybody about it for 30 years. When I did talk to somebody, it was my mom and my sisters, and they had never experienced anything in that house.
How do you think that shaped you?
I've always, a lot of people that would scare the hell out of them, but at the time that I saw him, I think it did me a favor, because ever since then, I have realized there's something after death, because I saw it with my own eyes. What it actually was, man, I don't know. Was it a ghost? It wasn't. There was no way it could be anything but, something that I actually saw. So Yeah, I consider it a favor.
Well, yeah, and with your writing, in addition, even though we're going to be talking about chasing North American monsters, you've written about ghosts, you've done a lot of fiction work as well, talking about the apocalypse, about the paranormal. So this is really, it seems like, in addition to being a storyteller and a journalist, this stuff has really gotten into your blood.
Oh, it absolutely has. And when it comes, I've done so much research for all of my nonfiction works on various aspects of the paranormal, and it doesn't just cover monsters and ghosts. Um, I've interviewed people who claim to have traveled in time and been possessed by demonic entities, and all across the board. Um, since I've done all that research, I'm like, this could make some really good fiction as well, and I already know what I'm talking about, so it kind of was easy for me to go in that direction.
So with you did Chasing American Monsters and 250 Creatures, Cryptids, and Hairy Beasts. And it's a great book. And I know since this interview is scheduled, we got one person that's in the audience. Ashley, who already picked it up. She's got a question about that, which we will get to. But now you have this follow-up with Chasing North American Monsters, expanding the scope on this. So there's a lot to cover. I mean, it's 250, but that's a lot of research. So I guess when you're setting out to do this, what was sort of the basis for the research? Because there's a lot of stories out there, but there's a lot of maybe things that aren't quite stories yet, so what was your compass as far as legend versus lore versus internet myth versus what counts for inclusion in this book?
Well, when I wrote my first one, my the biggest thing that I wanted to do was cover a lot of monsters that people had never heard of before. Because I mean, we all know Patty, we all know Champ, the Ohio Grassman, the Loveland Frog. I still covered those, but I made sure that each state that I went through, I found a bunch of monsters that people generally hadn't heard of unless they're from that area. Um, for Chasing North American Monsters, I wanted to do the same thing, and I've a lot of them that I covered. There are newspaper reports or magazine stories on these of people actually seeing things. Um, there are also definite legends. I covered a lot of Native American legends, and when I could find some news reports to back those up, I did as well. Internet legends. I covered a few of those, but I made sure to point out that this is an internet legend. Did this happen? What do you think? I asked the reader, with a little bit of, skepticism on my part. For the first one, yeah, I wanted to cover every state. For the next one, and this is really cool as a writer, you are basically begging publishers and agents to notice you and to sign you on to write. And my publisher of the first book got a hold of me and asked me to write the second one. So that was amazing. But when I did it, I also wanted to do the same thing, is make sure that a lot of these are reports that have been in the media, that have got that kind of coverage, and I wanted to cover the entire North America, even the United States again. Even though I didn't include anything from the first book. Um, I just wanted to give a well-rounded view of North America.
And you have a forward, Lauren Coleman, who I think many of us know that are into cryptozoology, does the forward on this. And you start off talking about your own experiences a little bit and the stories of Bigfoot, but you go into sort of the supernatural elements of these as well. We're not strictly in the creatures that may be out there but have not yet don't have documented proof. You dip into things like Wendigo and whatnot. So was there what was sort of the decision making process with that, kind of opening it up to sort of more of these mystical, supernatural type of creatures?
Well, when it comes to that, the Wendigo, that was fairly easy to jump on because there's a well-known, at least in certain circles, a well-known Wendigo case
Yeah.
from Minnesota, I think, from back in the 1800s, where a man was put under trial. He had a trial, and he was found, guilty of murder and cannibalism, but he claimed it was a Wendigo. So that gave me a good excuse to go into the Wendigo legend because it was, something that our United States justice system actually looked into.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the more surprising creatures for you to lock onto? Things that you had no awareness of that really kind of cracked open your skull a little bit?
Well, one of them, and I tell you right now, I am not going to be able to remember the name, but it also kind of bleeds over from chasing North American monsters to my one coming out next September, chasing the world's monsters. Is in Canada. There have been reports from the natives up there, from the First Nations people, for centuries, of a reddish brown furred creature that stands around 12 feet tall. It's got a tail, and it's got three-toed claws on each of its appendages, and it's called a beaver eater because it would rip open beaver dens and consume them. And the description of these is a giant ground sloth. And the giant ground sloth lived in North America, from North America all the way down into South America. And that was really cool. There was a report, I think it was the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, had a story back in the 80s of some natives in Canada up north, and I think it was the Yukon territories, saw one of these. And they identified it as a giant ground sloth. The same creatures are seen in Mexico and in the Yucatan Peninsula and in the Amazon, and giant ground sloths back in the Pleistocene had that entire range. So, I mean, there's something that people really don't get about the world, and especially the United States. I mean, the United States has been completely explored, right? Right? And there are people living everywhere. 45% of the contiguous United States isn't explored. I mean, people don't live there.
Yeah.
There are occasional tourists through this. 45% is a huge swath. So a lot of these creatures, maybe from the Pleistocene, could still be existing there, and we just don't ever see them because nobody's there to look.
That's why areas like Appalachia, it's so chock full of legends that, for good reason, because it's still so wild in so many spots, and also areas where it really could be conducive to an array of organisms to remain somewhat obscured and to thrive within these spots. So I that kind of thing blows me away, that we do have so much area that remains uninhabited by humans. But with that said, like, what are some of the other trends that you noticed as you're pulling all of these together? I personally, I love reading about legends and folklore, but also finding that connective tissue between cultures that would not have interacted with one another when these stories were emerging, and yet they're describing very similar types of phenomena. And then it makes you think, okay, maybe there's more to some of these things. For instance, there's so many little people type of stories out there. So, and I know you got into the Chinique in the book as well. Like, so what are some of the trends that you started to notice as you're pulling these together?
Well, I'm going to throw a couple at you. One, the little people, that's one that absolutely fascinates me because of the fact, like the Puckwudgies, from New England. Let's go to Europe. We've got trolls aren't the trolls of legend aren't the trolls from the Lord of the Rings or from Harry Potter. They're diminutive. So are the brownies and the fairies and the sprites and the tomties, um, elves. They're all the same type of creature. They're all between 2 and 3 feet tall. They're humanoid. They generally have larger noses and larger ears. They have some magical quality about them. They can all vanish. You don't want to eat anything they give you from any of these because you'll disappear. They will steal babies and replace it with their own. And they generally shoot arrows that are either poison or magical. That's Europe. And we have the same in North America. All of, not just in New England with the Puckwudgies, but the same legends go all the way across the country. We have, I can't remember his name, but he was in the Lewis and Clark expedition, and he wrote about when they were going through South Dakota, they went up to the Little People Mound because these little people, this is where they lived. They didn't see any, but still, it was mentioned in the Lewis and Clark expedition. There are all through the Americas the same legends, through Africa, through um, uh, Australia. And the thing that makes this really cool to me, not just the fact that these disconnected, these people, when they came up with these legends, weren't connected in any way, but in Indonesia on the island of Flores back in the early 2000s, the locals had always had a legend of what they called an Ibu Gogo, which meant grandmother who eats everything. And it was a diminutive person, 2 to 3 feet tall, large nose, large ears, stole children. Westerners thought, well, that's just a cute native myth, until scientists found a cave that had full-grown human skeletons between 2 and 3 feet tall. They even named them Homo florensis. We've got a new branch of our ancestors that were small. All right, that's been proven. What other ones are real?
What about some other trends that you started to notice?
Well, one of the things, and I wrote about this in the book, had to do with three-toed Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And I connected that with the giant ground sloth, because South America, up through Mexico, we had a three-toed Bigfoot in reports in Louisiana, the Honey Island Swamp Monster. It had 3 toes. Going up to Arkansas, which is up the Missouri River, or no, Missouri River, Mississippi River, the Folk Monster, which the Legend of Boggy Creek was made from, it left 3-toed footprints. The one I was talking about in Missouri, Louisiana, Missouri, Momo, the Missouri Monster, right next to the Mississippi River, 3-toed footprints. There were also 3-toed footprint Bigfoot seen in Iowa and Minnesota, and then we have the 3-toed monster in Canada. So maybe this is. I'm not saying it is a giant ground sloth, but maybe some of the same type of creature just migrates up and down the Mississippi.
Any favorite monsters in some of these other regions?
Well, when it comes to Mexico, not necessarily a monster, but the zone of silence. There's a place in Mexico to where you don't get a phone connection, you don't hear radio signals, you don't get TV signals, and there have been a lot of alien reports from that area. I included aliens. Are they monsters? Well, it could be. I mean, if the thylacine, which is the Australian tiger, the Tasmanian tiger, if it came back from being extinct, I would put that in the monster category because it's a cryptid.
Mhm.
At this point, it's a cryptid, and I'm going to throw aliens in that as well. Um, I'm going to take a step back. This involves not Mexico, but the Andes, and this involves China, because you asked about unconnected places that had something similar. This is in Chasing the World's Monsters coming out this year. There is a creature in China that seems ridiculous. Um, it's basically a rug, like a leather rug. It can be anywhere from a foot square to like 6 feet. But and it is lying in the water. So people walking by, it looks like a discarded piece of leather. Uh, it's located in higher elevations and it's always in water, but it's called the Zizi, Xizi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it will reach up. Its corners, its edges are all covered with uh, claws, and it will grab a hold of people and wrap around them, and its underside is filled with vampiric suckers, and it will, latch on and suck all their blood. I'm like, this is fun until I found the identical one in the mountains of South America. All right, and these are, the stories are hundreds and hundreds or 1,000 years old. How the hell does an exact same story of something that silly, it even had a very similar name, appear across the world?
So what's your takeaway from that? Are you more likely to believe in some of these things then?
That I don't know, but if the more things are seen in different places, the more I give them credence. And now let's bring the big hairy guy into this. What cultures have Bigfoot in their belief system? I have looked all around the world, every place, from the Pacific Northwest to Sri Lanka to New Zealand to South, to Patagonia, in South America. Every place across the world has a Bigfoot story. And these are centuries upon centuries upon centuries old. How could there not be a Bigfoot out there?
It would seem that there's something happening out there for these cultures that did not, these groups of people that were not interacting with one another to have these very similar stories.
Right. It's the same with your hat. You've got two ghosts, a couple Scooby-Doo ghosts on your hat. What culture doesn't have ghosts in its belief system? They
Right.
all do. Yeah.
And there's also this tendency to dismiss stories that come from native peoples because it very much gets into this territory of like, well, they were, the noble savage kind of story, or the uneducated native story. So then we just dismiss that.
Yeah, and I rant about this in various times. Let's take, for example, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Billy Forest, Bili Forest. The natives there have reported for years these giant chimpanzees that walk like a person, behave like a gorilla, howl at the moon, and they can kill a leopard and eat it. Okay, Western science that's hilarious. Until the Western scientists found it. There's actually, its DNA shows that it is a chimpanzee, but they're much larger than normal chimpanzees. They make nests on the ground like a gorilla. They walk generally on their hind legs, and they've been witnessed to howl at the moon and kill lions and leopards and eat them. All right, Billy Ape. This is something that we have discounted forever, and the locals were right. How often does this happen? There are pictures of Cadbrosaurus, pictographs of Cadbrosaurus on the Pacific Northwest, which is a it's a sea monster. It's a snake-like sea monster, but it's next to pictures of, like orcas and, things that actually exist in the water. Why are they drawing pictures of these things that actually exist and then something that doesn't? They're not. We just haven't found that yet. I'm fully in the corner of the native populations that say, no, this is real.
And folks, that are in the live stream audience, go ahead and register your questions. But we do have one from Ashley, not so much about indigenous stories, but she was asking if some of these creatures, if you think some of these creatures could be a result of exposure to nuclear energy. Your story about the Tennessee Terror stood out to me as an example of this.
I mean, there are a lot of monsters that have been, blamed on scientific experimenting. And one I can think of in California is the Billowhack monster, which is kind of a Bigfoot with goat horns. I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. I do know that the wolves of Chernobyl have evolved to, be immune to the effects of radiation. So radiation does affect certain things. I mean, that's pretty badass superpower to be immune to radiation. So I mean, it could, of course, very well be possible, but I don't know. And here's something I want to throw out to everybody: if you ever listen to somebody who says, "I know exactly what Bigfoot is," or "I know exactly what aliens are," or "I know exactly what this is," they don't know what they're talking about. None of us know exactly what's going on. All we can do is look at the evidence and put our 2 cents in.
What would you say is the weirdest location in North America either per monster per capita, maybe, or based on how wild the legends get? Weirdest location in North America.
How wild the legends get. I'm gonna go. Let me before I go to the wild legends. Let me go. What is the weirdest place for monsters?
Sure.
There are Bigfoot reports in Rhode Island.
Yep.
Rhode Island. I'm not disparaging Rhode Island, but it's not exactly Montana. All right, it's not as, well, and let's go with New Jersey. It is so densely populated, but there are also spots that aren't, and there are lots of weird things that happen in Jersey.
We do have a question from David and Alicia who want to know, now that you've written these books, and I was going to get to this, I like this question. Do you find that people reach out to you wanting to tell you their own monster stories?
Actually, no, I really haven't, which has shocked me, mainly for the fact that for 4.5 years, I wrote a newspaper column, every week, 500 words or more, that was paranormal based. It was called From the Shadows. And when I started writing that, I'm like, how in the heck am I going to do this every single week? I had so many people contacting me. I had more stories than I could print. So I'm kind of shocked that with these books that I haven't had more stories given to me. I'm open for it. If anybody, JasonOffutt.com's my website. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can do it through there and tell me your monster story.
Here's something that is right there in the title, it's subtitle of the book, but it's been in the news a bit lately. So let's get into it. Greenland.
Greenland. Good God. Yes.
So let's talk about the monsters of Greenland. And
they're weird. There are some really cool Greenland monsters.
I'm not going to even strive to pronounce some of these, but let's get into some of your favorites that you discovered in Greenland and why it is worth learning about Greenland monsters and celebrating them, especially since the country is largely dominated by indigenous tribes of Inuits there. So
actually, it's largely dominated by cold.
Yeah, well, cold, yes, yeah, and not a lot of green.
Right, and Greenland is called Greenland because whenever the Vikings first went over there, they wanted people, their people to come and inhabit it, and they lied. They made it sound like it was, green. I in doing research for this, I discovered there is one forest in Greenland, and it's in a valley, and it's 14 kilometers long. That's the forest. Their agriculture depends mostly on like root vegetables. So enjoy that reindeer and all that fish. Um, one of the things, now you got me thinking politics, which really makes me mad. Thanks a lot, dude. Um, one of the things that are one of the creatures that I really enjoy is I gotta mispronounce this, but the Ichthysik.
Right.
All right.
The elbow monster.
The elbow monster. This is the monster. A lot of the monsters that I found in Greenland, the Inuit monsters, had to do with, and a lot of these monsters do. When I go into, um, any sort of old type monster, it has to do mainly with a warning. A lot of Native American ones and South American ones and European ones are, don't go outside the firelight, or don't go outside the house at night, or this is going to happen. It's just to keep the kids around. In Greenland, this has to do with people not wandering away from it in the cold, but the elbow monster is a human corpse that had wandered out, didn't pay attention to the warnings, and wandered out in the cold, and ended up dying, and was reanimated. And whenever someone in walking around, it lost its legs, and then it lost its forearms, and it can only crawl around on its elbows, leaving a bloody streak in the snow. And whenever somebody gets lost out in the wilderness, they might be attacked for this, or by this. So yeah, stay out of the snow. There's another one that is a witch, that if you're out and about, out lost in the wilderness, out in the white wilderness, and you see a little, not kind of a cabin, and there's a woman who invites you inside. Don't go inside, because she's going to cut you open and eat you.
This would be the Vir Sinuk, I believe.
Yes.
And yeah, this seemed like a good cautionary story for perhaps foolish visitors that might be wandering in ill-advised into the territory of Greenland, and crosses the wrong native, because the witch is definitely a native of Greenland.
Yeah, well, and let me,
And
for
ravenous.
that one, which I can't pronounce, that the Veers
Sinuk.
Well, anyway, part of the things that I wrote was, and then she cooks and devours their viscera. No word on if she eats their liver with a nice Chianti.
You have the Satsuma Arna, who is the mother of the sea. You have the Kivitok, which is talk about the Kivitok, and also, I mean, the idea of what might possess a soul, according to some of these monsters of Greenland.
Whenever how did you pronounce that?
I said, well, I don't know how to say it, but Kivitok is what I'm saying.
Uivitoq. Yeah. See, I should have looked these things up, but I'm going to write them. I'm not going to say them. So that's your job. This has to do with a person being banished from a village. You'd think you'd have to do something pretty bad to get banished from a village, because what else is out there? Freezing to death, or elbow monsters. If they're tossed down to the cold, a ghostly entity, they become a ghostly entity after they die, that wanders around Greenland. They can turn into a shapeshifter if they want to, and they inhabit the wilderness, the frozen hills, and if anybody comes too close to their territory, they attack them. And they eat the people. All these things eat the people they attack. Anything can become one of these creatures as well. Even a bird, even a sea lion, anything that lives, whales in the area can become one of these entities. So you're not safe anywhere in Greenland.
I mean, that's why I like the Satsuma Arna, the mother of the sea, because this is you don't want to get on her bad side, but it's very much about um, not being wasteful, about
Yeah, not everything's bad.
honoring nature.
Right, so she's kind of a like my mom was when I was little. Don't clean your plate. People are starving in other countries. Right, don't be wasteful. Don't be waste. There are quite a few of these be nice to nature entities. A whole number of them in Central and South America. That if you are good to nature, if you use nature, uh, if you help nature grow, if you if you're kind, they will treat you well. And if you're wasteful, uh, you will not be treated well whatsoever. Now with the uh, Satsuma Arna, if you're wasteful and if you don't treat nature well, you won't have a good fish haul, which could mean your entire village is going to die. So it's a good warning.
It is. It's a good warning to not be wasteful, not be greedy, because Satsuma Arna does not like those who are greedy and mistreat nature. So it seems
Right.
like Greenland might have a lot to teach us about, if you're going to visit there, showing respect for
Right. Like if
Greenland.
you go out on a long trip, make sure you put on clean underwear, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
What are your thoughts about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or similar cryptids being potentially from a different dimension? And that is a topic of conversation within the certain Sasquatch communities. There's the physical being, and then more of the either elemental or interdimensional element of it. So what do you think about that?
Okay, so here I've got a lot of thoughts on that. My first is I'm going to view Bigfoot as a flesh and blood creature, a natural animal, or offshoot of humanity. One of the two, most probably an offshoot of humanity, because Native Americans and the First Nations people always considered them just a different human tribe that was big and hairy. Um, so I'm gonna treat them in my head like that until proven otherwise.
Okay.
Okay. I don't want to explain one unknown Bigfoot with another unknown if we can travel from dimension to dimension. So I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying I'm not going to consider it until the first part is discredited. There are a lot of people who will go this way because why haven't we found a Bigfoot body? Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why we haven't found a Bigfoot body. These things, if they exist, which I think they probably do, they're intelligent. They might bury their dead. There have been a lot of reports of hunters shooting a Bigfoot and a couple other Bigfoot dragged the body off. Okay, what are they going to do with it? They're probably going to hide it. The forests devour everything. The bugs, coyotes, the big cats, badgers, porcupines, they all eat every part of a body. It's hard to find a large body that's not recently dead out in the forest. And if Bigfoot exists, there aren't that many of them out there. So we're not going to be able to just walk across a dead Bigfoot in the woods. About them appearing and disappearing. The appearing and disappearing part, have you ever spent a lot of time in the woods? I have. We got a lot of wood when I grew up on the farm. We had a lot of woods that I roamed around in. And there were times to where all of a sudden, 10 feet from me, there was an explosion of movement and a deer sprang out and took off running. A deer is nowhere near as big as a Bigfoot, but it's not a small animal. And I didn't notice it was there. And it was about 10 feet away from me. All right. If Bigfoot are as smart as they're supposed to be, I'm sure they can hide and vanish whenever they want to. So again, I think there's a lot of natural explanations for Bigfoot. So we don't have to go to the paranormal Bigfoot or interdimensional.
This is where I kind of hedge a little bit. I do think there's likely some physical relic hominid out there, according to some of the actual primatologists and scientists that are looking at this. However, also being a ghosty guy and going, and spooky guy, and I think there's a lot more out there than we understand, more things heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, yada yada.
Horatio.
Yeah. I think it's still possible, and considering those indigenous tribes that might think it's a physical thing, but also that it's a elemental or spiritual being, that why not both? Why not all of it? It could be both these things. So they could both be either crossing over or operating on different levels entirely.
Okay, a couple of things that go along with that. John Keel,
Oh yeah.
the famous paranormal journalist who wrote the Mothman prophecies and tons of other works, um, came to the conclusion that there are window areas all over the world that are just thin between dimensions, between places, between worlds, and sometimes they get so close and so thin, things can step through them. That's what he thought Mothman was. Mothman came through a window. He was there in Point Pleasant for a very short period of time, and then went back through. And that makes sense to me. But the relic hominid, there have been DNA tests from supposed Sasquatch remains, or not remains, but hair samples, stool samples, whatnot. I believe Dr. Melba Ketchum had some DNA, work done, and it came back as being human, but with some anomalies. There was a Bigfoot researcher in Alberta, Canada. He had some work done, and it came back as human, but with some anomalies. Zana, are you familiar with the Alma, the Russian Bigfoot Zana? It was captured by a village, and the men used it for a worker, and they also had sex with it. And she had a couple of babies, and one of them, a scientist from England, had unearthed and had a DNA test on it, and it came back as human, but with some anomalies. And to me, that all went together with the Native American First Nations thoughts that their legends that this is just another branch of humanity. I think that would add up. What if the anomalies are the fact that it's 8 foot tall and hairy? This could be our cousin that we don't invite over to the family reunion.
I mean, it would kind of connect to the ideas of, and I know you mentioned this briefly in the book, but just the idea of these biblical appearances of a hairy man, or the fact that in Epic of Gilgamesh, there's the hairy man whose name eludes me right now, but so these are nothing new. They go back to prehistory for us as far as these earliest recorded stories.
Right, all over the world.
Yeah.
There's there's a bit in the Book of Mormon of a pastor riding home at night on his horse, and he runs into like an 8 foot tall, hairy human. And the human says that he's Cain from the Bible, who's destined to walk the earth forever. And, okay, there's a Bigfoot encounter in the Book of Mormon. That's cool.
I know. Chasing the World's Monsters, over 150 creatures and cryptids from all 7 continents, is coming out in September. But tee it up a little bit. When the book comes out, obviously right now we should be picking up Chasing North American Monsters. But what are some of the ones that you're going to dive into that you're pretty excited to share with your readers that you don't think most of them will have heard of?
Okay, well, in Chasing American Monsters, it said more than Yeah, there you go. It's right out. More than 250 monsters. Actually, it was 251. They weren't lying to you, but yeah, it's just 251. There were a couple more than that in North American monsters. There's only about 173 maybe in Chasing the World's Monsters. And you think that should be different. There should be more, but man, I'm tackling the big ones. I got a lot there. I got Nessie. I got Yeti. I got a few other big ones that I had to give a lot more room to. But I also talk about leprechauns. I talk about there's some lake monsters in England and Ireland that you've never heard of. There's some in North Korea that you've never heard of. I dig into some Japanese demons and some Korean demons that are really super fun. And again, Bigfoot. Every freaking place you can think of, there's a Japanese Bigfoot. Did you know that?
Yeah.
It's it's the hairy guys everywhere. And there are some monsters from Antarctica.
All right. Every
Yeah.
continent. I like it. And finally, Jason, which cryptid would be the one that you personally feel like could be your mascot? You're related to the most.
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Usually I get asked which one do I think's real, which is Bigfoot. But which one do I relate to most? Uh the I can't think of the name of it. It's a monster from Wisconsin that looks like a pig and it cries all the time. Good gravy. Why can't I think of this thing's name?
There is the squonk from Pennsylvania,
That's not with Pennsylvania. It wasn't Wisconsin. That was it. It was the squonk.
and then Hodag is Wisconsin.
Well, Hodag is Wisconsin.
I feel like you and I could talk all day about this, and I would love to, but I know I'm going to let you go. But once more, how can people keep up with you and reach out to you to share maybe those stories?
Okay, well, I my website is Jason Offutt, JasonOffutt.com. You can contact me through there. Or I'm on Facebook, Twitter, X, Thread. I can't call it X. Facebook, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram. My publisher wants me to get on TikTok, and I just can't do it.
Well, you got enough material to be on all of those. So, and once more, this book, Chasing North American Monsters, a guide to over 250 creatures from Greenland to Guatemala. It's out now, and this September, Jason has Chasing the World's Monsters, over 150 creatures and cryptids from all 7 continents. And my guest is Jason Offutt. And Jason, thanks so much for your time today, my friend.
Aaron, this has been great. I've had a blast. Thank you so much.
Well, we'll have to have you back out to talk about the next book, and your keep us posted on your books of fiction as well. And even outside of the monster gang, we want to hear about the stuff that you're up to. So
Most excellent. Will do.
Jason, thank you. Well, and folks, I'm Aaron Sagers. This has been Talking Strange, and thanks for checking out this episode. And also, if you're joining us live through Patreon on live stream, thank you. You guys should get on there if you're not on there and join us for the next live stream. I'm Aaron Sagers. Until next time, be kind, stay spooky, and keep it weird.